Hello everyone and welcome back. There is way too much stuff to talk about for me just not get into the subject of the video, so we're going straight into that. This is not necessarily a VR to Drew from She Who Walks Between the Worlds, but it is a little bit because I was thinking about this topic for quite a while after I watched her video on the spirituality thing about trees, and I kind of have my own story for you, so here's a little story time. So first off, trees are kind of regarded as very spiritual beings, if you will, and kind of among the witch community, we've all agreed that most people wander out in the wilderness and talk to the plants and talk to the trees and have a really good relationship with all of them. Not only are they very earthy and grounding, they have a lot of really good stories to tell, just to be fair. In a lot of folklore, the trees are regarded as homes of spirits. They represent fertility, recovery, nourishment. They're reincarnation to me because, the leaves will die off and they'll go into hibernation over the winter and then come back and bear fruit and be all alive again. And then there is a haiku, I believe. I didn't actually count it. Like a poem that I used to say to myself when I was in karate, so I'm not actually sure who wrote it. That was the better to bend like a willow than stand rigid like an oak and perhaps break in two. Now, that's supposed to be a saying of, hey, be flexible, don't be standing around and not gonna change your mind about anything and then get broken down because of it. But there are good attributes to both the willow and the oak, and if we like trees, we should definitely respect that. So, on to the story, because I was so moved by Drew's story, and I think I mentioned in another video that I talk to trees and I should be in some sort of a institution because of talking to myself. But I talk to myself more often than that anyway. So we're just gonna go to my story because everybody kind of agrees that they like to chat to the trees. There's a lot in Greek mythology too. Okay. Trees are very important. So, when I was a child, here we go. We actually lived where there was an awful lot of pine trees, and we kind of grew up on an orchard, more or less. So there was, I don't remember, we counted one time, probably about 60 different kinds of fruit trees. Okay, 60 different trees of varying kinds of fruit. So we probably had about half a dozen of each, peaches and apricots and plums and apples and like every fruit you can imagine. And my sister will attest to this, and I am sure that all of the trees had a very different personality. And the tree that had the rope swing in it was definitely a different personality than the tree that kept hurting us. Like every time we climbed in it, it hurt us, and yeah, it hurt us a lot. My brother cut his head open on one of the lowest branches. And then that tree definitely had a different vibe than the apple tree up by the canal where we would sit and look over at all the neighbors' houses and watch their dogs play in their yard and wish we had a dog. And those were just the apple trees. And then I think one of the peach trees died off, and there was a cherry tree that was super tall and hard to climb. There was a whole lot of different personalities in every one of those trees. And there was even one tree that had been grafted into having, I think, 8 different varieties of apples on it. If you take a clipping from one apple tree and then basically cut it and put some tape around it, it'll grow into the other tree. And that one tree had, like I say, I think it was 8 different kinds of apples from all over the rest of the property. And that tree was, I don't know, it's very complicated. And then there were a few pine trees that were rimming the edge of the fence. And those pine trees weren't very easy to climb, so we would always go down the train tracks to a smaller group of pine trees, and there was one that was huge. It was probably, huge by pine tree standards, so, I don't know, 3 feet across, probably, maybe 4. It was rather big for that kind of pine tree. We did have a huge pine tree that had been growing in the yard for years and years and years, and then it slowly started to die off, and eventually we had to come hire some guys to cut it down with a crane, and it was kind of terrifying and really sad. Also, there was a blue spruce tree that was growing right by the door, and when they replaced the power meter, they had to cut it down because it was literally that far from the outside wall. And that tree was healthy as anything, and everybody's like, oh, it's fine, it's just a bush. It's not really a tree at all. And I remember kind of being really close to that tree. It was basically dead on one side where the wall was, but the rest of it was like super poofy, and I really liked that tree. So that tree and I had a conversation, and I felt really, really terrible about it being cut down live. And I basically promised it, hey, I will take your tree spirit to a place where more trees of your kind will live and flourish, and replant that energy there for you, because it was so alive and vital, and it was really sad. And I was walking home a couple weeks ago, and there is a cute little grove of blue spruce trees, and I was like, I could put it there, but I don't know if that's the right spot. So I am still carrying around essence of blue spruce tree energetically. So back to the main story. The giant tree had several large, branches that were actually quite low. So we didn't have a ladder because it was probably a mile from the house. We would ride down there on our bikes and climb this giant tree with a stick that was propped up against it. And it was kind of painful, and there was a lot of pitch, just covered in pitch when you climbed that tree. But that tree was very, very quiet and definitely masculine. It was overwhelming. And me being, hey, I'm 12 and I don't really understand any of this stuff, I just kind of go with it, and there's already ghosts in our house, so I go into this tree and I'm like, cool, this tree is like an overwhelming personality, but we get along really well. And I think out of all of us, I spent the most time hanging out in that tree. And I would just climb up on one of the giant branches and lay on it flat. And just listen to the wind and be part of the tree for a little while. And that tree has been talking to me ever since. I have dreams about that tree. It's kind of a weird relationship, to be fair. But I love that tree. I really do. And it's kind of odd because it's I didn't necessarily choose, hey, this tree is going to be my friend now. I just sound like a crazy person, don't I? But that was the one that I completely vibed with the most, and it was so tall and so big, and I think some of the branches actually fell off after that, and now I don't even know if I could get onto my favorite branch, but I kind of don't want to go back there and see that it's died, because I will cry. I really will. So I have made pages and pages of meditation sort of stuff, including that tree, sketches, and just everything that I remember from the vantage point of that tree. We could look down and see one of our neighbors' horse paddock down there. And from that branch was the absolute perfect height. And it comes with a little bit of risk because you're thinking, well, I'm 30 feet off the ground, so, if I fall, I'll probably break half the bones of my body, but it'll be fine. But that tree was one of the very first things that I think kickstarted this type of path. Because it all kind of started happening at around the same time. Where you get mature enough to understand that there's other energy coming from places that isn't you, but at the same time still childlike enough to see them and feel them and be super sensitive and receptive. So that's my tree story. It doesn't have a name, I don't think. I haven't named it. But it definitely has a giant presence, and I will continue to do Book of Shadow pages and sketch pages of that tree because it is the most sacred to me. And I'm going to get a tattoo of a pine tree on me because I really like the Tree of Life thing, but I think it's a little maybe stereotypical, or it's not very personal, I guess. So I'm going to get the pine tree tattoo with my fox. And that's why. So there's my tree story. Hashtag a tree I knew. We're gonna start this now. I'm just kidding a little bit, but also I'd really love to hear everybody else's tree stories. Like, I'm that much of a nerd for trees. I'm gonna go now. Everybody have a great day. I miss you.